revolutionary. I am a 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 revolutionary.
They take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Where there's people, there is power. Justice in our time. Good evening, everyone. Our third episode for the year for Equal Starts. I've got my panel in there this week again. Thanks for coming along, cuz. And Kingsley, right-hand man, administrator. And Samia is back. We need your expert opinion today, Samia.
Go for it.
Because you're the only woman today. Last week it was only Haley. Well, not last week, the two weeks before it was only Haley. So I said, yeah, we need a female perspective on this, especially with that. Have you seen it? That new Netflix TV series?
Yeah, I'm just
Adolescent.
actually on the last. I've just got the last 8 minutes left, but I know what's happened anyway.
Yeah. So a lot of people I've seen talking about it, and they're using it as a ruse to say, oh, men need to be neutered, and violent boys, not educated, being incels, watching too much, gambling and violent TV shows, no contact with women, yeah, and pornography. So they're saying that these are the things that we need to do and stop it. Male influencers like Andrew Tate, spoiling the next generation's minds with his drivel. So, what do you think about that?
I'm gonna be honest. It's made me worried. I mean, I've got a son to bring up, and I think the part of it, like I read one article and it said like how different would this program have been played out if it was not a white boy? So the backlash. So I think on one of the comments I read, it was like, the comment was it's not white boys who normally stab girls, right? But actually, this could happen to any of our boys that we have. And I think when the mom says, we made him, it's about taking accountability for the fact that we have these children. If we give them access to technology that is not suitable for them, then as a parent, we've got to take responsibility. And yes, my children do have screen time, but I've got the restrictions to stop it when I want to. Right? I'm the parent in that situation. So, and I appreciate my son's only, 4 and 5, so I've still got time. But it obviously has opened up the fact that we do have technology. Our children are exposed to technology, much younger than from what we had. And it's about how do we, talk to our girls and boys about this.
Yeah, true. It's true.
Because on another page, you said like I'm a mom of girls, so like what do I teach my girls? But actually, it's about showing our boys that they can be there is good. It's just about making sure that our boys and our sons are given good role models, good male role models. So
You
yeah.
play the system. They know that they need to show good male role models. But as you know, on TV they're always showing violence and controversy. As Kingsley was saying
Yeah.
before we started recording, the gangster shows, Top Boy.
Yeah.
Anytime there's some kind of Hollywood flicks that's not fantasy in science fiction or comic book heroes, they've got villainous people selling drugs, killing on film, and that seems to be the normal thing. You go to the cinema, it's very rare that you get say a romantic comedy that's got a positive vibe. Maybe
Yeah,
two,
that's
three
true.
times a year. It's very rare that you get epics these days around, like say the Bible, the Quran, because the world's become secular. They
Yeah.
don't want too much goody two shoes because they say, well, there's not as much people show interest in it. They always want to see controversy, and it's
I know,
also
because
a
that's
way
what
to.
pays.
Sorry.
Because that's what will bring the money in. The controversial topics will bring the money in. But actually, they're kind of setting us up for failure in some ways. And obviously, we can't. it's a fine balance, isn't it? You've obviously got to let your children be children, but you've also got to, I don't know, it's kind of it's scary. I'm not gonna deny that it's not scary, to bring our children up in this day and age. But yeah, the articles that surrounding it has opened up my eyes a lot more.
To be fair, there was a kind of feminist activist that I done a market research study with a couple of weeks ago with Sedulous, and she's going on, yeah, it's so frightening and everything. I said, you do realize that violent crime has dropped since 1995? I said, over the last 30 years. She said, really? I said, yeah. I said, go and check the National Audit Office and the Ministry of Justice. I showed her. I said, it's not me making it up. I said, but
Yeah,
what I find odd is that the way the media portrays it, it's not. I said, remember, if you got a lot of people gaming now, like you said,
yeah,
being killed and they don't socialize, and they're in their alternate reality. We got much more CCTV. I said,
yes,
look, I said, in nearly every facet of crime since I was 15, the crime has dropped, violent crime has dropped. So why is it this frenzy of like, oh, it's so awful? And it's odd because she's in the sector. I said, you don't know this. So I said, what are you reading? So I realized a lot of what they do these kind of things called advocacy research, where
yeah,
the organizations do surveys and study, but they pick people according to if they fit the narrative, instead of having an impartial group and then having someone independent review it. So they can kind of massage what they want to peddle. And I noticed that's it's happened much, much more. And because a lot of people live in their daily lives, they don't really read anymore. They if they
yeah,
do, it's using the newspapers or it's consumed through social media where you can get loads of misinformation. This is why they've got us basically fighting amongst ourselves with this, masculism versus feminism. I told one guy I used to work with, and funny enough, the one where I done the social work mentor podcast. He was saying,
yeah.
"No, I just see this as a stain of society," and mentioning was it that fella's name again, Ron Comwa, the one that killed the three white girls. I think it was East African. He said two girls and I think and the mother and killed them in Portsmouth. Remember a few months ago, and they
Oh,
when
the
they were
fourth one
dropping that,
shooting.
yeah. Then obviously they were saying he was watching Andrew Tate beforehand and all that. I said I've
Yeah.
never seen Andrew Tate advocate someone stabbing people. Never seen that. So, what's that got to do with it?
They mentioned him on the show as well, though, didn't they?
Go on, guys.
They mentioned him on the TV,
Mm.
which I thought was very strange. Like, I don't understand where that came from.
Yeah, it's conditioning, trying to condition the mind. Listen, you've got to be scared for look. Look at Jason. Look, he's got his hood up. He's operations manager, but he looks like he's from the street. It's a masquerade. It's a masquerade. Look at that big black visual.
Mm.
He's got
Or you have to be
bald head and
careful of the
goatee.
misinformants and the
Yeah,
disinformants.
yeah, yeah. He must be a thing. I said actually, I said I went to university, done journalism, radio broadcasting. I said outside of a referee when I was 26, I've never had been in trouble with the police officially. So they're like, huh? It can't be true. Look at the way he's talk. Look, he's got to go too. He fits the thing. He looks like something out of Top Boy. Yes, they might see me and I said, oh, well, is she a letterbox or has she got to drop a bomb? This is how they are. It's all to kind of concoct these stories and these narratives. I said, yeah, this is, and yet when we was at school, they used to say, never judge a book by its cover. But this is
Yeah.
what mainstream media is
So now
doing.
we get this.
Mm. Yeah, it's a serious thing. A serious thing. So I wanted to see what did you think how we can overcome this in terms of making sure people know the truth and it's not this thing of we've got men fighting against women when we're the biggest divide on the planet and it's the way to control. It's like a colonial tactic, divide and conquer.
I think, like, so for example, you know how whenever you do your shows, you've always got like a female person
Hmm.
who's on the same side, if that
Hmm.
makes the right word. And showing that we're not actually we don't want a gender war. We just want a safe place for, for our children to grow up in.
Hmm.
So, obviously everybody's taken something away from this program. But it's just about going forward, like as a parent to a boy, you might be able to, give me an example. Okay, what do I do with my son to make sure that he's um he's not exposed to these kind of things
Hmm.
um as he gets older. And yeah, just kind of like I'll be honest, like in my in my time, I've learned from the other gender, from single fathers, good tips on how to parent because I feel like sometimes, obviously, both like when you have like the nuclear family, a mother is different, obviously a father is different, but when you're in a single parent house, you sometimes have to be mom and dad, right? And
Mm.
sometimes actually and I'm not saying this is my own experience, but I find sometimes I get the best tips on how to be a single parent from the single dads.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
That's definitely
I'm
refreshing.
not sure why. I'm not sure why. But it's obviously because maybe it's because they've got that empathic side already kicked in, and then obviously the disciplining of a father is obviously much different to a disciplining of a mother, right?
Hmm.
So you can't have, okay, I can't be I am maternal to my children, but when I'm having to be like the dad side to my children, it's very hard. So sometimes I go to the single dads that I know and I ask them for advice, like, what would you do in this scenario? And I don't get a judgment from them because they're coming to me at a very logical point of view. And they're saying to me, Samia, do X, Y, Z, and hopefully you'll get the desired outlook. But if I go to my mom's group, it's very like I feel a bit judged in that group. I know I probably shouldn't get judged, but I do get judged because it's like, you should know. But actually, I don't know. You, as a parent, you're always learning at different stages in your child's life.
Mm. Of course, definitely. There's no
Yeah.
manual.
But then, and I appreciate, the moms group is mostly made up of, nuclear families. But I do feel, in my own experience throughout the past few years, I've actually got more solid advice from the single lads who have been parenting alone. Um,
Okay.
um, so yeah, and I've spoken to,
That's
yeah.
different. Mm. That's different from what I used to get lashed with every day when I do this activism work and work with these charities and community interest groups.
No, but it's
Never hear
interesting.
that.
I don't know if it's because moms just always want to. I'm not saying, moms shouldn't be maternal and shouldn't be, shouldn't be like, how they, like, when kids fall out and you want to like kiss their better, like, and that magical works that,
Mm.
it takes worry away for the child. Of course it does, but I'll be honest, my experience, it has been that the single dads do give me better advice. They don't judge me for like the questions I'll come up with, basically.
Okay. Well, and you do the women do.
If I ask them, they just be like, yeah, it's okay. Like, they're just kids. I like, kind of allow it. But it's like, I know that if you don't nip a situation in the bud as soon as possible,
I agree
it's
with you.
going to carry on, right? You have to nip the problem as soon as possible, kind of thing. So
Mm.
it's kind of like, it's okay. It'll pass. It's a phase, it's a phase. And yes, most things are a phase. But some things you do have to nip it in the bud before it gets worse and, before it gets worse, basically.
That's true. You're right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely right.
and I think that's why, like, moms, yeah.
So,
Mm.
so Kingsley, you haven't said much. What do you think of this
No,
gender wars? How
been
would you
I've
deal
been
with it?
listening to what you guys have had to say so far. Where do I begin? Um, so just bouncing off the point that Samir has made with regards to fathers, single fathers, actually educating her. And I think there's a couple of things to consider there, which I think are interesting. Now, the single fathers as males, they have to be impartial to some extent. They can't be biased in a certain sense. Now, I would say that the reason why a lot of mothers would approach things a lot differently is because of the way that they are attached to the children.
Hmm.
So they give birth to the kids, they breastfeed them. So based on the oxytocin release that comes with them breastfeeding the children and nurturing the children a certain way. They're wired into looking at their children differently to how the fathers will look at the children. And so it's easier for the father to now take a dual-sided approach psychologically,
Hmm.
by being by main, providing as much discipline as they can compassion. Whereas with the it's with the mothers, it's a lot more linear. It's a lot more linear, which is why they can get remarkably intense emotionally when dealing with their children in some households, depending on their how they've been raised. So um, based on observation, it's clear that the single fathers are naturally more equipped to take on this responsibility because they know that as a result of not having a certain bond with the child by way of not giving birth to them, they have to invest. They have
Ah,
to invest in the well-being of the children from both sides. Whereas the mother, because she's attached to the child, she's not gonna be able to take a step back when needed. She's gonna always be invested, and especially when it's a single mom, and the case may be that there's an element of trauma that has come from the fallout of the relationship with the father of the kids. Then there's going to be an element of there's going to be traces of trauma bonding with regards to how they interact with their child. And you can see why, in many cases, they suddenly revert to calling their children their best friend and
Yeah, I've noticed
so on
that.
and so forth,
yeah.
because it's a form of coping mechanism.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so fathers, by proxy, have to bypass that in order to engage the child, not just rationally, but emotionally at the same time.
That makes sense.
It's true. But I have to admit, I've seen men, especially the ones that are single with their mum's not around, or they haven't got a partner. The children become their best friend as well. I saw what's that fella where he's like a nanny and he's a male nanny. He gets work like that, and he's become kind of like a minor celebrity where they anything to do with say gender and children. He comes
Yeah,
in and speaks and said, "Oh look, I work as a nanny in a female-dominated industry," and he said with his children. He bonds with them, and they're like his best friend as well. So you're getting more of that. You're getting more men, especially
you're
single
getting
that
more of
they
that.
don't have a
I
female
would
friend. It's like
argue,
that.
I would argue, and um, I could be wrong. I stand to be corrected with this opinion, but I would argue that the outcome of a father having their children their best friend as a mother having children their best friend is different because the father is not doing it out of a sense of based on trauma.
Mm,
So that's the one difference that I would outline. But going touching briefly on the TV show that you guys have been talking about with Stephen Graham,
hmm
I think it's a very I think it's a TV show that um, the popular media companies would put out there, and really the primary purpose of these kind of shows is entertainment. But there's a saying that I was told, I was given, which I will quote here, and it's that entertainment can be the myopia of the masses.
Yeah, of course.
And
Definitely.
so, um, to break it down, one of the things about entertainment is that they will you will be spoon fed something that will heighten heighten your emotional response. But then once your emotional response is heightened, you're given a sense of fear, you're given a sense of intrigue, you're given a sense of laughter. It's easy for the messages, the political messages within these drama shows, these films, to bypass to bypass to bypass you. So there's no real barrier. There's no real barrier of cognizance as to what is going on as you're watching the show. You're just taking it in the same way that you're drinking water. There's no real there's no real psychological filter, and so that's why such a TV show can really instill on one of many TV or shows, movies, other forms of media can instill a certain political bias, which will lead to people leaning to one side of the fence
Yeah, definitely.
and
And that's what's happened.
not taking an unbiased approach. And that's not to say that people should not have their opinion, but the majority opinion will lean towards one side, and so there's no real dialogue that comes out as a result of this. And when I say dialogue, I mean a dialogue that is fair, that allows for both sides to argue and to respect each other's opinions. And unfortunately, that's this show, like many other shows, are an example of how we're spoon fed a lot of junk.
Yeah, true. Yeah, of course, it is. It's like I was talking to another person that commented on LinkedIn this week, and they're saying, "Oh, look, this is why we need to have more, rogue policies, violence against women and girls. We have to have the Victims Commission, have extra powers. We need to, retrain adolescent boys to prevent them from growing up to be killers, as if most boys are killing people at school or killing girls at school. It's these exceptional circumstances, and that's what I don't like when it
No,
comes to."
this is, I don't agree with that because we don't need more of that. We need more positive male influences for our kids. We don't need more training. We don't need more dramas like this. We
We
just
don't. That's right. We don't.
we don't
Taking
need
it
these.
though.
We know it's there. I mean, as parents, like I'll be honest, I didn't know. I don't know anything about the red pill movement or anything like that. I didn't know anything about the 80-20 or anything like that. But it's about making sure that our children are shown, good role models. That's what it. We don't need more training. Definitely, we don't need that.
Yeah. It's a careerist thing in the industry. What happens? Domestic abuse workers
Yeah.
and sector has grown exponentially since like 2013, and so their
Uh,
whole thing, because they're getting paid to basically be counselors, low-level counselors, and provide therapeutic services and retrain the people. It's a way to get a job and get paid to do it. I
oh,
said that's
okay.
what I've noticed. This is what's happened, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I noticed Women's Aid, shelter, refuge, they're demanding more and more funding. Always saying, "Oh, look, we haven't got enough spaces for women." I said, "What are you talking about? There's 400, over 4,368 homes, refuges for women around the country, and there's only 73 that men have access to. I think 73 or 78 that they said they got access to. So I said, we know these kind of figures. So how is that even possible?" They said you've got a domestic abuse commissioner now. You've got a London victims commissioner. You've got all these smaller organizations that make up the Women's Aid umbrella team. So I said, well, how do you need more and more funding? What do you mean? It said it doesn't make any sense. I said, and if you want to reduce misogyny, it said what you have to do is give people a safe space, especially boys. They said education at school. Since I was at primary school, they said boys in general has been behind women when it comes to academic success. And they said not only are you protected more by the welfare state, when it comes to conflict in family homes, it's usually the man or the father has to usually leave. And then when you have these kind of homes, the delinquency increases when it comes to mental health issues, failure at school, being homeless, having broken homes later on in life. So I said, if you want to do that, then there needs to be more provision for young men and boys. So otherwise, this will only continue.
Yep.
But a lot of
Cycle
the
has
like, go on, sir, go on.
the cycle has to stop one day, and obviously, if you keep feeding the women's aid, they because it has a space, they'll be able to accommodate, right?
Hmm.
So you're just feeding the dragon, so to speak. So basically, that money needs to be invested somewhere else. Basically,
Exactly,
there
exactly,
is a pot of money, but it's about where that pot of money is being put.
exactly,
You don't
exactly.
need that pot of money for women's aid. I'm sorry, you need that pot of money, in the schools, as you said.
Yeah, you see, fun enough, what me and Kings are trying to do at the moment is that we're trying to get a violence against men and boys policy passed in our local authority, local council. But I noticed when I gave them the idea, and fun enough, Sally helped me write it up. They said, "Oh, this is very good, but we already got provision for this through our violence against women and girls policy." I said, "But listen to what you're saying. You already have provision within the violence against women and girls policy. So how? So you're basically giving them the funding, and they trickle down to men and boys in these kind of camps where they're saying, this is how you be less aggressive. This is how you stop being a toxic man or a toxic boy." And he said, "It's odd." I said, "If I was to turn around and tell you about, oh, well, I was brought over here in ships, in boats, in chains, and I want reparations, and I think this is a disgrace what you're doing." You'd be saying, "Oh, that's 150 years ago, Sean. It's 200 years ago. Why do you, that generation that done that is not around anymore?" So I said, the men, to be fair, some of them are still alive. The men that said maybe stop women from getting banks in the 1970s, being able to have a bank account without their husband or partner, said, to be fair, that was diabolical. That was only stopped in 1974. But I said, all this thing about female voting patterns and being able to work, there hasn't been like that since the Victorian era, like a good nearly 100 years before I was born. So how can I could say the same thing. That's years ago, and there's no greater provision and protection for women than this era now, especially in the Western world. So I said, how do you connect those two? How do you even have that disparity where you still think, oh, women are marginalized and the patriarchy is in control? So that patriarchy is very elite men, is 1% of the 1%. And so they're the same kind of people that have, control like the mainstream media, like Rupert Murdoch with the Sun and the Times. And so then you've got people like Elon Musk, who's got massive influence because of his technology companies, and he's a motor vehicle companies like Tesla and X. Now he owns Twitter. And so then they peddle out these kind of narratives, and it's a colonial tactic, basically. It's a colonial tactic. So I said, if we're gonna change things, I said this violence against men and boys policy that we've drafted, they've got it in Greater Manchester. That needs to go nationwide. So there'd be more provision for young boys and men, and there'll be less angst because the more you back up the men and boys said, "Oh, you're no good, you're terrible, you're a walking rapist, you're an abuser, you're too aggressive, we have to neuter you." Said the more you keep criticizing them without giving them provision with some carrot as well, instead of just a stick all the time, you're gonna create more hatred in these subcultures where they're hiding and say, "Yeah, we can't stand them. We only objectify women. They're only good for reproduction and to have sex with." I said, "This is what will happen. You actually feed, like you said, feeding the dragon, making it bigger and bigger and bigger." So I said, instead of showing like, say, Tony Montana, Pablo Escobar selling drugs and killing people for money, yeah, I said, how about we have everyday heroes that started a small business or has succeeded despite disadvantages? Why don't you have more of these kind of films and documentaries within the media? Why don't you have more provisions and services for adolescent boys and younger? So they feel like they've got a voice and they don't have to go into their hovels in the caves in the dark. Said, yeah, see, this is what happens. And without supervision and having a space where or someone they can trust, they can come to, you're creating misogyny and misandry at the same time.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gets passed after research. A couple of people in my local authority. They said because even though I've got the background research from other people, they said they need lived experience that's within the area to have it passed. So hopefully, if we manage to do that, then it can go across the London borough wide and hopefully one day nationwide. Hopefully,
Oh,
but we got a lot of obstacles. A lot of people thinking, oh, they're just trying to take away our funding. I said, no, no, we're not. They said there's enough money for everybody. It's just that we're gonna have to do it in a proportionate way for the amount
yeah.
of male victims and the amount of female victims. That's how you do it. That way, it's always equitable.
Yeah.
You know. Got a lot of obstacles, a lot of obstacles. So, wrapping up, what we're gonna do next time? We'll have to have a thing next time. You wanna meet at the similar time as today?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah? Is that
tonight.
all right?
So yeah,
All right,
yeah,
then.
works for me.
Well, this is the Equal Start panel signing off, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe. And where there's people, there's power. Justice in our time.